In the IELTS speaking test, how would you answer the question, do you have a driving licence? We could just answer with a straightforward yes or no, but that won't be a great demonstration of our English ability. So, in this episode, I'm going to give you multiple suggestions for ways that you can expand your answer and achieve a higher score. Hi, my name's Vic, and this is episode 16 of the IELTS with Vic podcast. You'll find the links to my YouTube channel and blogs in the show notes, so make sure to check those out later. And if you want a free copy of the podcast transcript, then head over to my IELTS blog to request it. In today's episode, we're going to cover types of driving licence, ways you can lose a licence, and categories of entitlement. To start with, let's think about different types of driving licence. In my country, the licence we get when we're learning to drive is called a provisional driving licence. Once we pass the driving test, we then apply for a full driving licence. So personally, I would begin my answer by saying, yes, I have a full UK driving licence. You may have noticed that I added UK there, before driving licence. In English, we tend to add the modifying information before the words driving licence. For example, I have a provisional driving licence. I have an Italian driving licence. I have an expired driving licence. Hopefully, you already noticed that we use the phrase I have a to talk about driving licences. In a very formal situation, someone might use a verb like hold, but in majority of cases, people will talk about having a driving licence. We can also say, I have got a driving licence. In the contracted form, that would be, I've got a driving licence. One way you could expand your answer is to say how long you have had your driving licence for. This feels like quite a natural way to expand an answer. For example, I have a provisional driving licence. I got it about 6 months ago. I've got a full driving licence, which I've had for about 10 years. Adding in the time aspect, my own answer might be, yes, I have a full UK driving licence. I've had it for about 22 years, give or take. Give or take is a nice phrase you can tack on the end when making an approximate guess about time. It works well in my case because I passed my test so long ago that it feels quite vague in my memory. So saying give or take expresses that feeling of more or less. If you don't have a driving licence, you can literally just say that. I don't have a driving licence. However, there are lots of ways you can modify this sentence to fit your situation. Here are a few examples. I don't currently have a driving licence, but I'm planning on applying for a provisional licence soon. I've never had a driving licence as I don't want to learn to drive. I prefer to walk, cycle, take the bus. I've never needed a driving licence because my husband, wife, partner does all of the driving. Or perhaps you are not allowed to have a driving licence for some reason, such as being prohibited by family or certain customs. If this is the case, you can choose how much of an explanation you want to give in the test. If you're not old enough to have a driving licence yet, that is also something you could talk about in the speaking test. You could tell the examiner what age people in your country can learn to drive, and then tell the examiner if you plan to learn when you're old enough. Alternatively, perhaps you did have a licence but currently don't for one of several reasons. For example, perhaps it was misplaced. You might say, although I passed my test, I've lost my licence and need to apply for a replacement. Or perhaps your licence was taken away for some reason. In the UK, for example, your licence can be revoked by the DVLA due to getting too many points on your licence, or for medical reasons. To clarify, the DVLA is the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Agency. That's the organisation responsible for maintaining driver records and vehicle registration. The DVLA is what we call this organisation in the UK. Of course, the name will be different depending on which country you live in. In the UK, it's also possible to have your licence temporarily suspended whilst something is being investigated. For example, if you're involved in an accident and it's being investigated, your licence might be suspended until a decision is made about whether you were driving dangerously. Going back to something I said a moment ago, in the UK we talk about getting points on your licence. If you are caught speeding, for example, you might be given points. Currently in the UK you can have up to 11 points on your licence, but once you hit 12 your licence is revoked. For newer drivers I think the figure is 6 points. Obviously I'm not a legal specialist so don't quote me on this, but you get the idea. Points in a game show are good, but points on a UK driving licence are not so great. How about in your country? Is there a similar system of accumulating points for traffic violations? Remember, the IELTS speaking test isn't a confession, so if you do have points on your licence, you don't have to tell the examiner if you don't want to. They're not a detective, they just want to hear some nice examples of you using English. However, if you have got some points on your licence and feel like you want to tell an anecdote about that, that's fine too. Whatever you feel comfortable with. The main thing we need to do is show that we are answering the question, do you have a driving licence? Another aspect of having a driving licence is the different categories of vehicle that you are permitted to drive. I passed my driving test in a car, so I know that my licence definitely covers driving cars. However, I just had a look at the back of my driving licence and it has loads of codes on for vehicle categories that I've never actually paid attention to before. So I just spent a few minutes checking online and found out that I also have permission to ride mopeds, drive three-wheeled trikes, drive light vans and tow a trailer. I'm glad I checked as I had no idea. Those extra categories of vehicle entitlement are something else that I could mention in the exam if I wanted to. I used to have a provisional entitlement for motorbikes as I passed something called the CBT test, which stands for Compulsory Basic Training. That's the test that allows you to ride a small motorbike in the UK. You're supposed to then pass your full motorbike test within 2 years to get full motorbike entitlement. However, I failed my bike test and never got around to retaking it. Because my CBT expired after 2 years, I no longer have provisional motorbike entitlement. How about you? Do you have any special entitlements on your driving licence? And if so, is that something you might want to mention in the speaking test? To summarise then, if you do have a driving licence, you could mention what type and how long you've had it for. If you have any special categories, you could also mention that. Alternatively, if you don't have one, you can talk about why and whether you might want to get one in the future. The next step is to spend a few minutes creating your own expanded answer to the question, do you have a driving licence? If you like, you can post your answer in the comments, and then I can give you some feedback on it. Just 1 or 2 sentences is a good start, so go ahead. Tell us if you have a driving licence. Also, I recently posted a poll on my YouTube channel asking for your opinions on future topics. One of the topics that initially got the most votes was taking photos, so that is what we're going to cover in next week's episode. Before we finish, I just wanted to mention the Support Me on Coffee links that have recently appeared on some of my platforms. Coffee is a tipping platform where people can treat creators to a cup of coffee. So if you feel like shouting me a coffee, check out that link in the show notes. Thanks for joining me today, and don't forget, if you want a free copy of the podcast transcript, then head over to my IELTS blog and fill in the form. See you next episode, where we're going to be talking about taking photos. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.